Hey, what's good, guys? Just out enjoying another beautiful day here on days off. Trying to get as much in with summer as I possibly can. We spent first half of my days off boating, and yeah, it's just kind of delays how much of these I can do and how much time I can put into this, but it's been awesome. I have to enjoy as much summer as I can, especially while we're smoke free. I know in Alberta right now it's just completely socked in with smoke. When I was working the last 2 weeks, I was just inhaling super thick smoke. It's killing my lungs. So I was happy to come here and realize there wasn't as much smoke, but I know quite a few fires have sparked up here since I've been here on my days off now, and feel like it's just a matter of time until all of BC is also going to be socked in with smoke. Fortunately, so far, nothing at home, so that's nice. So again, just enjoying every bit I can while conditions are the way they are. Hope you guys are having an awesome summer so far. I don't know how much of an intro I should really do here. This is going to be a little bit of a longer episode. I feel like I kind of going to give some context and some backstory to this episode, because I really think this question of like, can money buy you happiness, is going to be very circumstantial, and it's going to be kind of approached individually based on everybody's circumstance in which like you actually got money, right? So with that said, like, I didn't get this money from an inheritance. I didn't get it from a lottery win. I got it from an insurance claim. Essentially got it from a lawsuit. For those of you who don't know, I was in a pretty significant car crash when I was 21 years old. Tons of physical trauma, lots of mental trauma. I was the only one who survived, and my fiance died right next to me, and the guy who hit me, he was drunk. He killed everyone. Somehow I made it out, but definitely not unscathed. And anyway, all that said to say, it led to a big lawsuit. Basically, I ended up suing his insurance company, like we all have our insurance, right? So that if we're at fault for something, that money's there to cover us getting sued by the person we affected. So that's what I was doing. Now, before all this, I had no idea how any of this stuff worked, how ruthless insurance companies are, how third parties can even get involved, and maybe if you don't get anything else out of this video, just understanding how this process works. And I should say this is in Canada. I know it's way different process in other countries. But yeah, so I came out of my coma, and I found out my parents immediately got me a lawyer to start building a case. And I had no idea that there was different types of lawyers until halfway through my whole case and everything. But what I did end up finding out is there are two different types of lawyers. The ones you pay as you go, and I ended up realizing those types are the ones, if you can afford it, are the ones to go with, because they're a lot more inclined to stay involved in your case and stay on top of things, because you're paying them out of your pocket, usually hourly, or at the very least some will even do it monthly. And but that is the downfall to them, though, is the fact that you do have to dish out this money out of your pocket until you do get your whole case settled up. So it can be financially burdensome. So that's where the other type of lawyer kind of comes in, where you can pay them based on commission. They take a big percentage of whatever your final claim is after your lawsuit's all settled. But what I ended up finding out, as this was the type of lawyer that I ended up having hired for me, was they don't have as much incentive to stay on top of your case, because they're trying to get other cases wrapped up as fast as possible so that they can get paid their chunk of money at the end of every case. So a case like mine, where it's going to be a little bit more complex, there's a lot more involved compared to say a minor whiplash or some fender bender or something like that. Cases like mine end up getting pushed to the side so that lawyers can end up essentially settling up these smaller whiplash cases and stuff like that and getting paid a lot sooner. So anyway, I found that out, and then I ended up finding out that the way these claims get broken down, these personal injury claims, there's two major categories. There's pain and suffering, and then there's past and future loss of income. based on the significance of the physical trauma that I endured as a burn victim, and my leg broken in 3 places, my back was fractured, my colon ruptured, needing to be sewn together, all of that stuff, I thought the pain and suffering side alone, I was going to be eligible to all the money that was there to take, which I will just say that there was $1 million coverage on this guy's insurance who had hit me. So I thought I was going to be eligible. I was the only one who survived. There was nobody else going after this money or eligible for this money, or so I thought. And I thought with just the pain and suffering I went through, I was going to be eligible to a lot of it. And a lot of people in my family who didn't know how these cases go also thought the same. But what I ended up finding out is that pain and suffering actually has a cap, or it did at least at the time, of $350,000. And for you to even claim that full amount, you have to basically be paralyzed from the waist down, or be like dismembered and missing limbs, all that kind of stuff. So luckily that wasn't the case for myself, so I didn't have to worry about that. But at the same time, it didn't really go in my favor for trying to claim that $350,000. So I was 21, I was healthy, I was young, and I managed to recover from my major surgeries fairly quickly. And then that's what I also found out wasn't going to go in my favor when it came to past loss of income or future loss of income. So say you were a carpenter for work or whatever, and you lost your arm, and you can't do your job the same, you're going to get a lot bigger of a compensation than somebody who, say, has an office job. Maybe you lost your arm, but you still can use your arm for work. Insurance companies are going to look at that as, well, the guy is still capable of working, so why do we really need to pay him that much money? So the way they look at it is, how much does this affect him? How much money did he lose when he went through the trauma and the physical injuries? And how much is it going to affect him going forward? So in my case, because I healed up really fast, and essentially I was able to go back to work after a year of recovery. So they were like, okay, well, for past loss of income, we'll give him whatever he was making at the time, which was nothing. I was this young kid still trying to figure out what I was going to do career-wise. And basically, I think I was making like 40 grand a year. So they're like, okay, he missed a year of work, so we'll give him 40 grand. And then we'll give him a little bit of the pain and suffering category, but definitely not the full 350,000. And then I was like, okay, well, telling my lawyer, like, okay, that's the physical stuff, but what about like the mental stuff? Like, I was suffering. I was struggling to keep myself alive, and just contemplation of many times of ending things for myself. So anyways, he was like, yeah, like, let's get into some counseling, let's get you to a psychologist, and we need to get that on paper, right? So I went and did a bunch of therapy, specifically just to have on paper that I was mentally traumatized, being a permanently disfigured burn victim, and also losing my fiance and my best friend at the time. So I did that, but then the insurance company came back and said, yeah, well, prove how significant it really was. Was she really, your fiance? How do we know that you guys actually didn't just meet like a week ago, kind of thing? And how do we know that you didn't just hire some therapist who's got a bias or is on your side on all of this and is essentially making things up? So then they'd come back and say, come to our therapist. We want an assessment with our person of choosing. So this is where I realized how ruthless insurance companies are. Anyways, at this point, things were not looking good in my favor. Year after year was going by. My lawyer, again, I felt was constantly pushing my case to the side and dealing with other quicker cases. I wouldn't hear from him for months. I ended up booking my own appointments, my own assessments, trying to build my case, trying to make things move along a little faster. And then eventually 8 years had passed, and I had found out that there actually was another person involved in the process, and I didn't even know, but there was a woman who shared custody of a kid with another guy who was actually in the car who hit me, who had also died. So she was trying to claim on the deceased guy's behalf for for compensation for her kid and the loss of child support, essentially, which, you know, when I found that out, I immediately thought, like, that really sucks, and I have a lot of sympathy. But then I found out that she was actually trying to claim over half of the million that was there, and I thought, okay, well, that seems a little greedy for one kid. And also the fact that I'm here, you know, going through all this stuff, like, directly. So anyways, I found that out, and I didn't realize that we also were battling her. My lawyer eventually said, you know, Jesse, I think we're at a point now where we're about as good as we're going to get and as much money as we're going to be able to get. And we're in negotiation back and forth with the insurance company and this other woman. And my lawyer basically said, listen, like, unfortunately, this whole thing didn't quite go the way we hoped. I thought you were going to be able to get a lot more, but it was just hard to prove to the insurance what they needed proof of. So he's like, we should just settle on this, and what I'll do is I'll actually cut my commission to make sure you end up with an even $500,000. So I ended up taking him up on that deal, and that's how I ended up with the money. When I got that check, I felt immediate relief. Like, and it wasn't even just about, you know, money aside. It was just the fact that all of this was finally behind me. I finally could move on, and now, you know, I could start a new chapter, turn a new leaf, and leave everything behind in the past and start a new future. Almost immediately after, like not even a month after that, I actually ended up with a new issue. I ended up more conflicted than ever about what I should even do with that money. And people were making me incredibly confused as to what to do with it, because of course everybody in my inner circle and in my life directly were all telling me what they would do with it and what they really believe I should do with it. And, you know, it was like, you need to buy a house, or you need to invest it, or you need to go on trips, or buy a new vehicle. Like, there's just all sorts of suggestions. But this money was literally labeled as compensation for loss of life. And that's how I was looking at it. I looked at this money like it was a trophy, like it was a reward for everything that I had gone through, and this congrats on, you know, not taking your life, and for the resilience and the perseverance it took to get through all of it. And so the thoughts of investing, the thoughts of putting it in a house and all of that stuff made me feel like there was a possible risk of losing that money by doing so. I mean, if the real estate market crashed, or, you know, my investments plummeted, then I lost my trophy, and I lost, you know, what this compensation was supposed to be, that my chance of recouping life. So anyway, as much as $500,000 seems like a good chunk of money, it really isn't when you start thinking about, you know, how much you can actually do and how limited you actually are, especially when you start thinking about big purchases like that. So I knew what I wanted to do for sure was recoup life, and I also knew that I wanted to map out a new future. I wanted to consider a new career, and so that's what I did. I took a year off, and I enjoyed life, and I did the cliche things that a lot of people do when they just see a big chunk of money just show up, like a lotto or whatever. And I didn't have a whole lot of stuff before this. I didn't make a lot of money, and so I ended up buying like this Harley. I bought a dirt bike, jet ski, bought a couple vehicles, modified the vehicles the way I've always dreamed of having a vehicle, and I went on trips and did a lot of experiences, and it was a blast. Like, I'm not gonna lie, it was a lot of fun, and I'm really grateful that I got that opportunity to have recouped that life that I lost in my 20s. But what I realized in between all of that is I still had some really low days and some like depressive moments. It really tripped me up, because I really thought, like I said, like everything's behind me now, and you know, I could finally move on, and plus I got a bunch of money, and money buys you happiness, right? So and I did, like the money felt good, and doing the stuff felt good, but it made me realize, like, there's something else that I got to really focus on here, because I could continue on this path of just enjoying life and spending this money and going on trips and essentially distracting myself, which is what I realized part of this is I was distracting myself from this residual depression. But at the end of all of this, it's not going to end well for me, and the future is not going to look so bright. So I realized I really need to focus on getting this depression that I had been dealing with for years prior sorted out once and for all. So I went to my doctor, and he had been with me, for years prior. He knew my whole history. We've had many conversations around my depression in the past, and he knows that I've never been for prescription medications, and I just have my personal opinions and perspectives around it. I didn't like the idea of being dependent on them, and I feel like a lot of specialists don't use them the way they were intended to be used, and to just stabilize you while you get to the root, to get to the core problem and resolve those things. I find a lot of specialists end up just keeping you on these pills, or a lot of clients end up not wanting to do the work, and it's just easier to rely on a prescription. But anyways, guys, that's just my perspective and my opinion. But he knew that, and I was like, I want to do the work. What do I got to do? What more do I got to do? We've tried things before. I've done therapy before, and it didn't quite work. So he set me up for a bunch of assessments, bunch more therapy with different practices and procedures I've never done before. Set me up for some sleep tests. I've done in-clinic sleep tests to see what was wrong with my sleep. Thought maybe part of that was tied in, and nothing really came of those tests and those assessments. My blood work was good. They played with my diet, didn't really change too much for me mentally, and the sleep test came back, said I sleep fine, which was bizarre to me because I've had years of sleep problems. And then the therapy, I didn't feel like was really getting me any further than where I was before. So went back to my doctor, and I was frustrated, and I was so grateful that, he didn't end up just saying, well, maybe you just need to go on a prescription, but he knew I didn't want to hear that. So he actually said to me, he's like, you know what, I think you're in a great place. You're determined to figure this out, and I think you're intelligent enough that you can continue down this journey just by yourself. It was like he had this confidence that he knew I'd eventually figure it out as long as I just didn't give up. And I really, really appreciated that. And yes, my doctor is a rare breed. I'm well aware of that. Most doctors are not like how my doctor is. And I feel so fortunate that I had him, especially then. But that's what he did. He encouraged me to learn and research and read as much as I could about depression, and find out more about the psychology around my condition and the symptoms and how to navigate them and all of that stuff. So that's what I did. I decided, you know what, I'm going to continue staying unemployed, and I got to focus on myself, because again, what kind of future am I going to have if I don't end up fixing myself? Because something that I also forgot to mention is that as much as I physically could go back to work, I wasn't really mentally there. I ended up getting laid off my very first job. They didn't say the reason was because of how I was, but I knew it was how I was because there was also employees nicknaming me Eeyore and Angry Jesse because I was just so emotionally unstable. Understandably, I was going through so much grief, and it was tough. It was tough for me to hold the job. It was tough for employers to want to keep me around, and I just knew that if I don't get this figured out, I'm going to keep hitting these same obstacles and these same dilemmas that I found myself years prior. So anyways, I started diving in. I started reading all about my depression. I learned stuff that it was crazy to me that there was therapists that never even told me about PTSD triggers. They told me about PTSD and figured that's what I had, but they never told me about things that trigger it. And I never understood why, I always would relapse. I'd be doing awesome for months, and then all of a sudden, I just found myself, back in this dark hole out of nowhere. So I learned that on my own just by reading, again, on PTSD. And then, of course, I went down, the YouTube rabbit hole. I ended up learning about, mindset stuff from certain coaches. I ended up learning from other therapists that were on YouTube. And one of them made me realize that a lot of my answers, they're all found in the questions that I asked myself. And that's when I just started asking myself so many questions. And when I was asking myself these questions, one of the answers I ended up coming up with was realizing why I also keep relapsing is that I'm perpetually focusing on what I didn't have. I forever just wanted my fiance back. And I found myself in this culture where I just didn't feel like the majority of people valued that kind of relationship. And so I was frustrated and I felt hopeless that I was ever going to find it again. And that's all I'd fixate on. And then when I was alone, I'd get lonely. I'd fixate on the loneliness. And then I would think about how I'm going to be perpetually lonely because I'm not going to find that kind of relationship again. And so I realized I needed to figure out how to flip the way I'm looking at this, and especially those times that I find myself alone, so that I don't end up feeling that loneliness. And one of the ways that I found was best that ended up working for me was I was going to focus on becoming the partner that I essentially wanted in my life. And this ended up kind of killing two birds with one stone, because that not only later on actually it did attract other partners, you know, the ones that I was looking for, by becoming essentially them. But in the meantime, when I was by myself, I ended up being that person for me. So I was good with my own company. I didn't hate being by myself, and I didn't think about how I needed somebody else to be there to fill that in for me. So one of the biggest breakthroughs for me was going through that and doing that. So once I sorted all that out and I figured all that out, one other thing that I was starting to figure out too was I was lacking purpose. I knew that for a while, but there was more to the depression than just the trauma that I'd gone through. It was just this lack of contribution, lack of purpose. I think the only thing I really found purpose in prior was being in that long-term relationship and being a good partner to my girlfriend. Other than that, I didn't really have much. So when I lost her, you know, I in a way kind of lost my purpose, and I never really found it after that. So I was like, okay, well, let's figure out like what could purpose look like, you know? And I'm not the only one, obviously, who's gone down that road, but what I did do, it was the easiest thing to do. I had money, and I was able to give a lot of money, and I was able to donate a lot of money and contribute to people who were less fortunate, and it felt awesome. It was great. I'm so glad that I was able to do that, and I was in that position. But obviously, I still wasn't working at the time, so I had no income coming in. It wasn't going to be sustainable for me to continue just giving my money away as a sense of purpose and a sense of contribution. So I had to think of another plan. So what I ended up doing is I started thinking about like how else I could serve, how else I could contribute to people without directly just giving money. And so because I was so inspired and influenced by these coaches and stuff that I found online, I kind of decided like maybe that's my way of kind of doing this and giving back, because maybe I could be a coach myself. And so I pursued certifications in 2 different forms of coaching, and one of them was also in fitness. Those of you who know that fitness and training, weightlifting, like really saved my life. So I really wanted to get educated in that in hopes so that maybe I could encourage somebody to do the same if they ever needed it for the same reasons I needed it, or even just to feel confidence, as it brought that for me as well. So that's what I did, and I've been fortunate to have helped quite a few people, mostly in my inner circle, but nonetheless, anyone who's ever come across my path and have had the opportunity to help and coach, I have, and it's been really awesome to do, and it has definitely given that sense of contribution and being able to give back and some purpose out of it. So that's what I did. And then lastly, what I ended up doing was I felt like I still needed full acceptance of what I had gone through. I really wanted a reason for what I went through, and I think that's really common for anybody who's gone through anything super traumatic. I think that what they want essentially is to justify the pain that they had gone through. I mean, I think that's why you see so many motivational speakers or public speakers after they've gone through something traumatic, you know, like the guy who lost all his arms and talks about how he had to shift his mindset in order to survive, and he tries to share that now, and he's affecting people's lives positively, in a way justifies what he's gone through, right? And I felt like I never found that reason. I had so many people tell me, everything happens for a reason. Everything happens for a reason. And I think a lot of people want to believe that, and I think it's a great coping mechanism. But the problem with that statement is a lack of action. That people would say that like, oh, it just happens for a reason. That reason's going to come one day. You're just going to stumble across it. But year after year went by, and I didn't find no reason for why I went through what I went through. And so I realized, like, if there's going to be a reason, I got to make the reason myself. And I did. I wanted a reason. I think, just like I said, like a lot of people who've gone through something significant wanted a reason. And so my way of going about it was making a documentary. The whole thing did not go the way I hoped to go. And I wanted to make it a lot longer and tell a little bit more of a story, but I was thinking about people's really short attention spans today, and I didn't know if anybody would even watch a long documentary about my story, or look at it like, yeah, just another story of a guy who's gone through some stuff, So I decided to go really short with it. And either way, it tells a pretty encouraging story that, no matter what you go through, there is a way out if you're determined enough to get through it. And you can make a reason of it if you want to make a reason for it. So I did that, and it really did help. I think last I saw, it's been a while now, but last I saw that video got about 1,000 views. And I know at least a handful of people that it really impacted and helped out. So it really helped me. It helped me justify what I went through. And if there's anything to take away from this, is that the priority should always be on building the foundation of who you are first. If you find yourself in a position where you start making some money, I know we're in a consumer world and we all have wants and desires. And like I said, I even got into that when I got this money as well. But had I just continued on that path, I would not have rebuilt the foundation of who I am. And, I had so much life still to live going forward. I was about to turn 30 when this whole journey started, and I'm like, man, like, if I don't get this sorted out, who knows where I'd end up. Or maybe I would have bought that house after my year off and go back to work and struggle to stay employed and still be given this nickname of Eeyore or whatever, and have these depressive episodes and find myself in my new house hung from a chandelier, So at the same time, guys, I think to be able to experience life's all about experiences. As much as material stuff is awesome, and material stuff definitely brings those experiences, like buying a dirt bike will get you outside, will get you on the top of a mountain and see some amazing views and stuff like that. You want to focus on the experiences more than the material. I'm glad I got to experience the nice things for a minute, but now I'm at a place where, like, I can enjoy, riding on a nice boat as much as just a walk on the beach by myself. And that's because at the end of the day, I'm just at peace with myself. And so that, guys, in a nutshell, is how I made $500,000 essentially work in my favor to buy me happiness, contentment, and peace. At the end of the day, it's just about your intention and also realization of where you are. If you find yourself in a position where you're making a ton of money, or you're focused on just making a ton of money, thinking that that's going to buy you peace by just getting rid of the financial stresses in your life, it's not going to resolve whatever else you might have going on inside of you. So always good investment to just focus on yourself and have a lot of self-awareness as well around where you're at in life. So anyways, thanks for coming along for the ride, guys, and I'll catch you on the next one.